Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending our presentation today, Applying to Graduate School in the Social Sciences and Humanities. My name is Don Brunson. I'm the Assistant Dean of the Vanderbilt Graduate School and also the Director of the Enhancing Diversity in Graduate Education Program. And I'll have my colleagues introduce themselves. We'll start with Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie LaRoe. I'm the Assistant Director of Undergraduate Research at Johns Hopkins University.
Thank you. Matthew.
I am Matthew Tanico, the Assistant Dean for Academic Support and Outreach at Yale University.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Patricia Ray, and I'm from the University of Penn. And I'm the Associate Director for Admissions here in Arts and Sciences.
Okay, so we have introduced ourselves, and what we plan to do today is to share with you what we've learned in our many years of working with students like you. So to begin, this whole process overview of applying to graduate school, we recommend that you do a self-assessment, that you also do a review of programs at various schools. That includes admissions requirements, faculty in the program, because one of the very different things about graduate school compared to admissions at undergraduate school are the two things, fit and match. And we hope that you are able to identify departments and programs that have faculty members whose research interests align with yours. The applications, there's also an interview that's often associated with it, managing responses and funding and support. So I want to open it to any of my colleagues who want to make comments about anything in those areas. Dr. Matthew, comments? Okay, so with these things in our overview, let's continue. So we talked briefly about a self-assessment, and that is, this is a kind of reflective writing assignment. So we want you to think about writing your reasons for going to graduate school. That is, why do you want to go to graduate school? What specifically are your career goals and interests? The important question, what are your goals? Eventually, would you like to go into a research career, academia? If so, are you interested in research and teaching alone? Are you interested in going into industry, government, or the private sector? As social scientists and humanists, you have a variety of options available to you, and we want you to make sure that you think these things through, because your answers to these questions are going to strongly affect which programs or which departments at which institutions you will put in applications for their PhD program. Does the expertise in your field, that is, what is it that you want to do, does that actually require a PhD? Does it make sense to gain experience in the field and then apply it to the program? There are some specific programs, for example, it's not unusual in religion, some forms of education, for example, special education, sometimes teaching and learning, where you are required to get a master's degree before you can apply to a PhD degree and have a successful chance of being admitted. And in other fields, you can go directly from a bachelor's degree to a PhD. So the question for you is, does it make sense to get a master's degree? So today we're going to talk about some of your reasons, but not at this moment. I'd like you to think about your reasons for going to graduate school. And if you could just make a note to yourself, a note or two. We're going to ask some of you to share them, and hopefully you're comfortable enough to share them with us, and we can help you talk through those when we get to the discussion period. Again, I'll open the floor to my colleagues if they have any comments that they want to make about any of these things.
I think you covered everything.
Anything to add, Dr. Julie?
I was just going to share that, it's okay if your goals change as well. You don't need to think that you're going to be working the exact same thing for the rest of your life just because you choose to do an advanced degree. So there's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of movement now which in my opinion is a very good thing. So one of the things that sometimes we have to overcome is the fear that I'm not quite sure that I want to be in academia the rest of my life. I'm not sure I want to work for the government forever. And that's okay.
And I think the important thing, particularly for students in social science and humanities disciplines, is that this phase of your career is about building your toolkit, meaning the research that you're doing now, as Dr. Rose said, is not necessarily going to be the research that you end up doing in a graduate program or in your career. However, the important thing now is to take advantage of the research and professional development opportunities that you have to build the toolkit that's going to allow you to make an easy transition to the next phase in your career.
So we have a question in the Q&A. I think this is a really great question.
Sure.
And it's anonymous. So my working assumption is that the social sciences, as much as it is an highly applicable field, gives way to many theoretical works involving less technical terminology and more critical thinking. Do you researchers in the social sciences ever feel inferior to life or physical scientists who are doing what may be more apparently present itself as research in the eyes of the general public?
Oh, now that is a really good question. The answer is no, because it is the the answers that social scientists and humanists provide to scholarly research are very important. Take, for example, if you're a political science major now, all of us know what's going on in our country and across the world. Political scientists, for example, are at the forefront to answer some of the questions on, for example, let's say you're interested in voting. Why we vote the way we do? How do we choose candidates? What are on the minds of voters on the issues of, what's going on in a lot of the social justice fields? Folks in, sociology are on the forefront to perhaps provide insights into research to answer the questions on how do we do better? What is it that we need to make society move forward, whether that is with respect to justice and policing, et cetera. Again, I'll open it up for my colleagues to weigh in, because there's just so much that can be done, not only in social sciences, but the humanities.
So I am a Latin Americanist. My work is in Latin American narrative, contemporary Latin American women writers. And sometimes STEM people will feel or imply that we are inferior. I never feel inferior. I may be a little bit furious at the insinuation that what I'm doing is not real research because it's not necessarily quantitative, but it's very, very important. And it's important because the humanities are really about, and the social sciences as well, are about the creation of knowledge about what it is to be human. And so I tend to think of STEM as the nuts and bolts of the way the universe may work, but the humanities are the way humans work.
Thank you. Any additional input? Yeah, one of the things that, for example, this is one of the years I'm really excited that I actually have more social scientists and humanists in my program than STEM folks. And one of the things that we often see, when there are more STEM folks is, you get questions, what are you all doing? Et cetera. Although, a lot of your research is online, as Dr. LaRose said, you're still answering questions. You're doing in-depth research to provide answers to questions that have not been answered. And the answers to those questions, not only the process, but the answers themselves are really, really important. So if you are one of those persons in a program with a lot of STEM disciplines, down south, we'll just say, bless your heart. But please understand that your work is certainly not inferior. Your scholarship is in no way inferior, and it is extremely valuable, not only to academia, but in all these other fields that we talked about. And regardless, everything that you're doing in research is going to be applicable in any career that you decide to go into, because you have engaged in this process of inquiry leading to discovery, innovation, and the creation of new knowledge. So the application, all of you will apply to graduate programs, and these are some of the aspects of the applications. It includes, in most cases, the application itself, which of course has both objective and subjective characteristics. You know, objective characteristics are typically your GPA, what courses you've taken, your standardized test scores. Those are objective. They are what you are, or they are what they are. You should check out individual departments and programs, because we are seeing at this moment the requirement for standardized tests, which you see as the last item on the list. They are changing. Even in the social, it started off in the biological sciences field, but across disciplines in the social sciences and the humanities, the GRE is becoming required less and less. We have a few programs at my school, and I'm sure that my colleagues have some programs in their school. So the application, if you are required to do the application, and you generally are, there's an opportunity for you to get a fee waiver. Because you are participating in this virtual professional development workshop, we will receive your name, so you will be eligible for an application waiver at our school. That can save you anywhere, I'm guessing our costs are anywhere from $50 to $125. Our costs are different. I think at Vanderbilt is currently $95, and I'll let my other colleagues talk about Penn, Yale, and Hopkins about their costs just briefly for the application.
Yeah, our fee is 90. So just as a participant in the Leadership Alliance, just ask for a letter and send it over to me, and I'll send you the code. We have a code that you would use. It's really easy.
The others?
Ours is 105, but similarly, we have fee waivers for many programs, including this one.
Dr. Noel?
We also have agreements with almost 30 different organizations for fee waivers, and our application fee is in general is $70.
Yeah, please read the application instructions carefully. When you're applying for these fee waivers, they give you specific instructions.
Right.
We would love for you to take advantage of it, but it requires you to follow our directions to get them. Typically, these instructions are very simple to follow. So now that we've talked about that, let's talk about the subjective parts of your application, the letters of recommendation, the graduate essays, as well as other requirements, including CV. So the letters of recommendation. So typically schools will require 3 letters of recommendation, and there's sometimes opportunities to have additional 1 or 2. We advise students, if you are going to have more than 3, that you make it helpful to the faculty who are on that admissions committee by having those persons provide knowledge that the other 3 have not. Keep in mind that these faculty committees are reading many, many applications, and you want to make it extremely easy for them to do an evaluation of yours. Any comments, colleagues?
I just would say one thing that I've learned from all the conferences that we've been at is to create yourself a spreadsheet, because there's a lot of details here that are easy to forget or get confused with different institutions. So list the schools that you're applying to and when their deadlines are, because I know just at Penn, they vary across the disciplines. Our general deadline is December 15th, but that's not set for everybody. So it's easy to get mixed up, and a lot of times when you're late, it's a problem. You know, they're either closed, they don't want to accept it, you know. So design yourself a spreadsheet and list all the schools, because there's a lot. We require 3 letters of recommendations, like Dr. Brunson said, but you can submit up to 5. So there's every institution has little tweaks to their application, and it's easier if it's all laid out on one spreadsheet that you can refer back to.
Absolutely. That's a great piece of advice. And yeah, even at my schools, different programs in the social sciences and humanities have deadlines from December 15th through January 15th.
Yeah.
And you
Yes.
want to make sure that you make a note of that. Also, related to letters of recommendation is you need to make sure that you give your recommenders sufficient time to write
Yeah.
and submit your letters. The important thing about that is in the event that, let's say we're now 2 weeks out or so, or 3 weeks out, you can send them as, well, as we used to say at another institution where I work, gentle reminders that, these things are due. Just in case, you have to remember that your recommenders, who will probably be mostly faculty and perhaps some administrators, they have lives too. And sometimes things happen and things are thrust on their radar, which suddenly will change their priorities. And it's not that they didn't care, and they agreed to write your letters because they wanted to, and they think that they can provide you with helpful letters of recommendation. But in case something happens, you can say to them, dear Professor fill in the blank, or dear Professor Johnson, the deadline for this application is approaching in 3 weeks. Thank you again. You might start it off by thank you. Thank you again for agreeing to provide a letter of recommendation. Dr. Tanico, would you like to say something about requesting a letter of recommendation?
Sure. So I would just emphasize what was just said about giving ample time. I would also think about faculty members who know you in different capacities and could potentially talk about different aspects of your work or your professional life. Generally, I would also say when thinking about your application, and this goes back to a little bit of what was said before about the self-assessment, it's easy to think that you can write the same application for all of your programs and apply and just submit the same documents. You can really tell the difference when a student has done their research and knows why they want to apply to the specific program and to work with the specific faculty members at that institution. And so think about how to incorporate that. It's not that you have to completely rewrite all of the information that you're putting into this application every time, but what is it that you can say that's unique to that program? What center do you want to work within there, or which faculty members' books are you particularly excited about, or courses are you particularly excited about? And including those personal touches is really going to make the readers realize that you've done your homework on this and that you've really thought about your match for that program, because that's what all of this is about, is you figuring out which program is right for you and then them thinking about whether you're right for the program and making that sort of match. So sorry to sort of pivot that answer to a slightly different topic, but
it's okay. That is a wonderful segue into our next part, which
I
is,
was going to
I'm
circle
sorry.
back just really quickly too with the request for letters of recommendation. When you ask the faculty or your other mentors for their letter of recommendation, I cannot stress enough that you help them remember details about you. So I was doing some calculations and I figured that I have had over 3,000 students since I started teaching many, many moons ago. And even if I was really, really impressed with you, it's going to be hard for me to remember details about things that happened during our interactions.
Yep.
So I ask my students when they want a letter of recommendation to include in their request as an attachment, I would like their CV. I would like them to provide a link to the program that they're applying to, and to nudge my memory about what class they took with me. If they can attach their final paper, maybe include a comment about some conversation or interaction that happened in the class that might refresh my memory a little bit. And also to include if there's a particular focus that they would like from my particular letter. So if I know them from a class, do they want me to focus on the quality of their research paper? Are they really looking for more of a personal in-class leadership interactions that maybe some of their other letter writers haven't focused on? If I know them outside of that context, what really is the gap that I can fill with my letter versus everyone else's? And just be very open and specific. because that's really helpful to know.
Mhm.
That's fantastic advice. And I would also add for your letter writers, if you can include a fairly complete version of your graduate essay, particularly your statement of purpose, because that will also let them know what you're planning to do and why. So all of the advice that was given was fantastic. And we're going to segue into the next part that we're now talking about, the graduate essay. So particularly the statement of purpose. That's a fairly important part of this, of the essay. So let us go on to the next part of discussion, which is about these graduate essays and particularly the statement of purpose. So what are programs, departments looking for? And these are the different kinds of essays that they might require. And we say might because things are rapidly changing, and they've been rapidly changing since 2020, particularly with the rapid decline of the requirement for the standardized tests. With that in mind, institutions would like to get better and more information beyond that. So the predominant essay that you'll be asked to provide is called the statement of purpose. Then there's another application, which is a little more personal, called the personal statement. And to go back to the statement of purpose for a second, this essay is going to specifically state why in your own words, that you would be an ideal candidate for this opportunity. Particularly, this is going to be a graduate opportunity. And if those of you who are not going to be applying to graduate school and might be applying for a second summer research experience, it's also a part of that. But this is, in your own words, why you are interested in that particular opportunity, what's led you to consider graduate education, information in your background, explaining why you would be a good fit and what you plan to do afterwards. The simplest way to think of it is, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? Why you think you can do it, and what you want to do afterwards. That's the simplest way to think about it. The personal statement is a little bit more personal, although some of the information in a personal statement will be similar to, or will be incorporated into a statement of purpose. There are research statements which talk about exactly what kinds of research you have done, what you have learned from those opportunities, and what you've done in those experiences. I'm going to open it to my colleagues who might want to make some comments about the research statement.
Sure, I can jump in. The research statement is really, really important. I kind of think of the statement of purpose as a little bit of a combination of the personal statement and the research statement. It's kind of a hybrid animal. I think there's been a move away from personal statements more to statements of purpose, but it depends on the institution. The research statement, what's really important about this is that you frame it in a way that you're showing what you have learned and how that's going to help you be successful in graduate school. So it's not just, I learned all of these particular techniques or strategies. It's how is that grounding my understanding of what it is to be a graduate student and my purpose after graduate school.
And I'd like to get my colleagues' feedback. I advise students that this research statement for each project that you worked on, it should not be more than 5 to 7 sentences, because it's right to the point. Keep in mind, it's not your writing sample. It's just talking about it's the nuts and bolts. What did you do? Why did you do it? What is it? What did you learn? And what does it all mean to you moving forward for graduate education? That's the simple way to think of it.
Consider your audience, right? Your research statement is for people who are experts in the general area. They may not be experts in the specifics of the research that you've conducted, but they have enough knowledge to be able to understand the background and not need every single minute detail of the process. So once again, here, I just think the audience is really, really important.
Right, and you definitely want to make sure it's very conversational in tone. like Dr. Rose said, as if you're writing to someone in your discipline, but not necessarily your subdiscipline. So if, for example, you are, let's say sociology, let's speak on sociology. Let's say, for example, you are a sociology major. Well, that faculty committee is going to consist of folks in different sub areas or different fields of sociology. So although you might be, you might be in educational sociology, you want to make sure that you write that research statement at a level that anyone in another sub discipline of sociology can find and understand it. And remember, don't lecture them. Don't say things like sociology is the study of, no, don't do that. I promise you that a graduate faculty committee in sociology knows what sociology is. So you've wasted a small part of your essay by giving them a lecture on what sociology is. Don't do that. Okay. The other essays, there is a chance that you'll get an open-ended essay. If it is, make sure you follow directions. Dr. Tanniger, you want to make a?
Sure, sorry. I was going to chime in on the last piece for a second, just to say it's important to also show that you're open to new ideas, right? The research statement is not about saying, I know exactly what I want my dissertation topic to be. You're coming to graduate school to broaden your intellectual horizons. You're not coming because you know exactly what you're going to do and you're going to carry that out. So it's really important to show that you've done research and that research has actually made you think about broader topics and that you want to apply those topics to different areas. So don't get too don't put your blinders up and just say, I need to know exactly what I do and everything about it now. That's not what graduate school is actually about, right? It's partially about education and then becoming that independent scholar who really knows where they're going to go.
And excuse me for jumping in. There is another question in the Q&A, but I'm going to postpone that one. The next question is, what types of research count towards research statements? As a history major, I have many historical research papers for my history classes. Can I include those in my research statement? I would say yes, absolutely.
I would say yes as well. And I would chart a course of an intellectual trajectory that shows that you know how to be a critical thinker, and that through that writing process, you have developed new ideas, and it's sort of taken you on a certain intellectual trajectory to where you now want to go to graduate school and think through those ideas. I think that's what the humanities is kind of about.
Right. And don't forget to say, for those papers that you've written, why, we know it's an assignment, but why did you write those papers? What did you find? And what did you learn? Or how did this research paper influence your journey to continue into research and into your discipline? And to loop back what Dr. Tanico said is, keep in mind that, again, it is about your continuing to develop your toolkit, your academic, your scholarly toolkit. So if you have in mind, I want to do this and I want to do this only, keep in mind that graduate school is about acquiring additional tools to answer questions and to become a scholar by using the tools that you have or the tools that you could gain to apply them to research.
That's right.
For those open-ended questions, again, make sure and generally that they're not too personal. Remember, these faculty committees are interested in learning about you as a scholar and how you can enhance your scholarly profile and how they, as mentors, can contribute to that and supporting you while you're developing as a scholar and contributing new knowledge to the field. Colleagues, anyone want to?
Just say too, thinking about this holistically, think about yourself and all the things that you want to get through in this application and where that fits in whatever essays or statements the institution is asking for. And that might have to change from school to school based on the types of prompts you're being offered. But as we were just hearing, you don't necessarily want to make your open-ended question into your diversity statement or your personal statement, right? Like there's a place for all of those different pieces, and you have to figure out where they fit together so that collectively they paint a picture of who you are, both as a person and as a scholar.
Thank you. And
one thing,
I'm sorry.
one thing to just remember too, that when you're writing your statements, to make sure that you're writing to the correct school, you have all the right names in the statements, because you want people to see that you're really putting your time and effort into it and not making a mistake. We several times get mixed up with Penn State. Of course, we're the University of Penn, so and it's just sometimes that's a pet peeve of mine. So always be careful what you write, copy and paste, you can have a general statement, but always make sure that any reference to the institution is the right one.
To kind of follow up on that a little bit as well, never send out any of these items if you have not had at least another pair of eyes on them.
Right.
I would suggest several. These are iterations. These are not one-time writing. These are really the only thing that a committee has to go on about who you are. So the quality of the writing, and that by that I don't mean that it has to be really academic speak. That's not what I mean. But if you have grammar errors, if you have things that aren't clear, if you have, your statement of purpose is one paragraph long and it's an entire, 750 words, those things matter because they speak to the amount of writing preparation that you have had, and that's important for success in grad school.
Yes, keep in mind these statements of purpose are typically 1.5 to 2 pages long. Typically, they're rarely longer than that. And sometimes students will confuse that essay with the writing sample. And I'd like to have Dr. Leroux.
So really quickly, before we talk about the writing
Sure.
sample, there was a question in the Q&A. Can you be more specific or give an example about what you mean by not being too personal in a personal statement, such as should we express why we are personally invested in the subject we wish to study? My answer to that would be yes, you should absolutely express why you are personally invested. So I talk a lot about framing these statements. So for example, if you have overcome a serious obstacle or issues that have made doing research or being a student more difficult, then you can absolutely use that to frame your personal statement. And when I say frame, that means you have a couple of sentences at the beginning and you're going to close the frame at the end by referring back to that. Say you had this professor or this high school teacher who was the one who inspired you to study in this field. You would open with that, and then you're going to close with that, but you're not going to spend the entire personal statement talking about this professor, right? Because we want to know more than that about you.
Yeah.
So that's what, when we're saying not being too personal, I don't think it's not being too personal. I think it's talking about the same thing too much and not giving enough of a general overview of who you are. So like one focal point
Right.
is
I'm
probably
sorry.
not helpful. Don, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, please keep in mind that faculty members are trying to evaluate your ability they're looking at your background, for example, your coursework. They're looking at what their peers have to say about you in the letters of recommendation. They're trying to get a picture of you as a scholar. How productive and successful will you be in the program? Do you have the right coursework to be able to come? Students think a lot, oh, it's graduate school, it's about research. Yes, but before the research, there is didactic coursework that you must complete. So they have to know that your background is sufficient for you to be able to approach the courses, understand and be successful in the coursework. And they want to know what you as a scholar hope to contribute. Yeah, and so that's when we say not too personal. You can talk about, for example, your high school teacher or, maybe someone at undergraduate level, but remember, you're framing this work to say, this is why I'm interested in it, and this is what I hope to do as an emerging scholar.
So let me follow up. Another question in the Q&A is, does additional learning effort caused by some neurological conditions count as diversity?
I would say absolutely.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I think that neurodiversity and showing that you have developed the strategies that that have led you to become a successful student and researcher are valuable. So I would
Yes.
say yes.
Absolutely. And it also can allow them, in case there are some additional support services that you need, to be able to help direct you to those. It's not something that's used against you. It's actually used as something in support of you if you are comfortable discussing that information.
Yeah, so I also agree with that. I would just think about it also in the context of what does your, whatever diversity, however you're defining diversity for this statement, what does that mean for the program that you're entering into, and what does that mean you bring to that program, right? So really always going back to the fact that the reason all of these application materials exist are to figure out what your fit is with the program. So it's not about the diversity just for the sake of valuing diversity, which we do at all of these institutions, but it's actually because we know that having a more diverse group of people working on a problem is going to help us solve the problem in a better way. So what are you bringing to the table by having that sense of diversity, whether it's neurological or otherwise? And the other thing that I would just say, because I think some of these questions are coming from the fact that it's a little bit confusing with all of these different categories. Not all institutions are going to have all of these categories. So again, going back to something that I mentioned earlier, you have to figure out where these things fit in based on the things that you're being asked for. So at Yale, for example, all we require in terms of the graduate school is a statement of purpose and 3 letters of recommendation. The department can decide whether or not they want what we now refer to solely as a personal statement, but that supplanted what we used to have as a diversity statement. So the personal statement essentially is the diversity statement, but you can figure out how you want to frame that, going back to Julie's point. So really think about what the program is asking for and what information you want to give them and how to match those based on the different prompts that you have available to you.
Absolutely. Remember, how has your diversity contributed to your scholarship and your journey as an emerging scholar toward pursuing this degree, hopefully a PhD that you're applying to?
So another question in Q&A. I recognize that we should not duplicate any of our own writings across applications, but what about letters of recommendation? Should we ask our recommenders to tailor a unique letter of recommendation for each program we apply to, which could be double digits, or can they do a broad enough letter that can be submitted to several similar programs?
Okay, well, let me first back up. No, it should not be double digits. Number one, remember we talked about this self-assessment. I would say 5-ish to 8-ish, and that's a high end, because this is not something that you're just going to just look at a school's name and decide, oh, I like this school. You're going to need to do, as Dr. Tanico said, you're going to have to do sufficient research on the faculty members to understand what their scholarship is and whether this could be a good fit and a good match for you. Yeah, this is a huge task, writing these essays. Again, the requirements are changing, and you'll have to look at the different the different requirements for each school. But keep in mind that this is going to be very, very intentional, and hopefully and you should find 2 or 3 faculty members whose research align with yours. If it's only one, you should not apply to that program. And the reason we say that is because anything can happen. That faculty member could leave the institution, could be on sabbatical, is not taking students that year or in a couple of years. So if you just find one faculty member, that's probably not a good fit, or that's probably not going to be a good choice to make. So you should identify 2 or 3 faculty at an institution, and also don't just drop names. Let them know that you know what their scholarship is. And this, again, this is just a sentence or so to talk about that faculty member and the work they're doing and why this is a good alignment for the work, for the research that you're interested in.
Yeah, just to answer the question specifically, no, like your faculty member is not going to write a different letter of recommendation for every program. They're never going to do that. That's on you because it's not important for the faculty member to figure out why you're a good fit for the program. It's important for you to figure out why you're a good fit for the program. And to say that in the other aspects of the letter of the application, the letter of recommendation is really a testament to the work that they've seen and the type of person you are as a scholar. And yes, they might have one sentence that says, I highly recommend this student for admission to Yale's program in American Studies, and they swap that out for each of the institutions, but that's the extent to which they need to really tailor that. That's not what the letter of recommendation is necessarily about.
And I've gotten letters that mention someone else's program, like the faculty member forgot to tailor it. So I really don't care. I get it, it happens, and nobody cares. You know, the letter of recommendation is for the person, not really for a particular program, unless I have a contact with someone in that program, in which case I'm going to say, hey, so-and-so, I know you, right? I'm going to direct it to you, and it's going to be a little more personalized. But for these general, yeah, it's one letter. It might be a second letter if maybe you're applying to programs that are significantly different. So like I had a student who was applying to many English departments, but was applying to the very few, but growing Africana Studies departments. And that letter was different because the focus of her research would be different depending on the two different types of institutions, but that's pretty uncommon. I'm going to follow up. Someone also asked, can I ask for a recommendation letter without having a program to apply to yet? And I would say absolutely. I have a student who came up to me less than a month ago and said, I'm going to be applying for programs next year. Would you be able to write a strong letter of recommendation for me? And I said, yes, absolutely. Thank you for letting me know ahead of time. That like puts you on my radar, that when you do reach out and ask, I'm going to remember that you were planning this. Matthew?
I'd also just add to that, if there's another opportunity for which you can ask for a letter of recommendation, that's helpful to the faculty member to have that, so that then when they need to write your letter of recommendation for graduate school, they can use that as a starting point and a draft. So for example, if you apply to a program like the prep program that we have at Yale through the Leadership Alliance, that would require a letter of recommendation to get into as a post-bac program. And then you could go back to that same faculty member and say, okay, now I'm applying to graduate school. Here, can you use the letter that you wrote me for the post-bac program and just add these things that I've done since then? And going back to what was said earlier, provide them all of the information of what you've done in the meantime. Some of these faculty members might not have interacted with you super closely in the past year or 2 years. So really fill in the gaps and feed that information to them. Be intentional about that. But it is helpful, I think, to ask them for the letter of recommendation as early as possible, especially if you can use it for something else.
And I would even, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I think that this is a good way to open up a dialogue between you and the faculty person. They can kind of tailor it a little bit better when they know this about you, that you can talk about what areas you're thinking about going into and you're not sure yet. This will open it up for you to have that conversation.
Yes, and when you ask, I would encourage students, don't just ask for a strong letter, ask if they can write a strong, detailed letter.
Right.
Sometimes what's going on in our minds through our conversation may not necessarily be the same, but when you specifically ask a faculty member for a strong, detailed letter, and you do what my colleague said, provide them specific documents to make them remember you, understand the work that you've done, understand the work you want to do, that has the potential to make for a very, very convincing letter in a faculty peer-to-peer conversation about admissions. With your writing sample, as Dr. LaRose said earlier, this is an example of your scholarly writing. You only want one, and you want to pick what you think would be best to show your scholarship in your discipline, not necessarily what you're pursuing. And it also gives you the opportunity in the statement of purpose to talk about, and I've included a sample in my writing sample, some work that I've done. And you can even let them know specifically, I'd like you to see X, Y, and Z. So they'll know that, oh, wait, you did an undergraduate degree in psychology, but now you're applying to sociology. How does this make sense? But by reading your writing sample and knowing there are specific things that you want them to understand, you allow them to have a context for your scholarship, an additional context. Colleague, before we move on to the last slide.
Just say it's important to think about building those relationships. So this is why you should go to office hours when you're in coursework, right? Because that way the faculty member starts to get to know you and you build that relationship over time, and you go to them for other advice and you sort of ask them as you're applying to various different things, and you keep them informed of what's going on. That will be what makes a good letter of recommendation, because then that person actually knows you. So try and really focus early as possible on building relationships, whether or not you know if the person's going to eventually be the person you're going to ask to write a letter of recommendation. But I think that's just an important part of being a scholar.
Matthew, following up on this, remember I'm a Latin Americanist, so we're talking Spanish language, Latin American literature. I cannot count the number of letters that I've written for graduate professional schools in STEM and for medical schools, veterinary schools, because my class sizes are very small. And so I can really interact with the students in ways that maybe their 300 person anatomy class, they're just not going to have that kind of relationship with the professor. So the students that do come to office hours, that show interest, that show their academic progress, can get a great letter of support.
Sure.
Because I know them and I know their work ethic, and it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. What matters is I know them as a person. And sometimes that part is the hardest part to get from a faculty member, because maybe you haven't had the time to establish those relationships, or you're in very large classes. So it's on you to start building that now, before, and you don't know, like, you're not sure who to ask anymore. And unfortunately, you can't really get letters from your TAs. So your TAs may know you, they may really like you, but they don't have the academic power of a full professor. So it's not going to be in your best interest to get a letter from them, even if they were willing to give you one, which most TAs will not, because they know it's not in your best interest.
Okay, thank you. And now for our final slide. So just to give you an idea on how to write this personal statement, keep in mind that the personal statement, when it's asked, the committee wants to know who you are, and you can use this acronym for who you are, WHO, to think about how to write them. So for example, talk about W, welcome. You're going to describe unique and give unique specific details that'll give the committee insights into your life qualities. The H is history. Describe how you learned of and became interested in the field, or the opportunity and some accomplishments that you've done. And the outline, which will describe how you've reached this point in your life and experiences, including some research experience that have led you to your goals and your interests in graduate school and graduate education. So at this point, we want to open the floor for any additional questions that you have in the Q&A box. And I also ask my colleagues, are there any additional comments that they'd like to make regarding this personal statement when it's asked?
So there's another question in the Q&A that I've pushed off a little bit. And the question is, if we plan on taking a gap year, should we wait to apply until the following application period after we graduate?
Patty, I'll let you start.
I would say to just wait, because sometimes the application things change. Your application is just going to sit there and the pre-stage of submitting. So it's up to you. I mean, some people do it, but then you start with one term, you forget to change it, it comes in the wrong way. It's just, to me, it's not worth it. If you're going to take a gap year, you should just take your gap year, and you'll have more to talk about when you write your personal statement. about all the experiences that you've learned over the last year.
Dr.
So
Zadigo,
I
Oh,
don't,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
not quite sure. I was just going to follow up on the question. Should you go ahead and apply, complete your application and then take a gap year? Or are you saying apply, start your application and then continue it? So I'm not quite sure on the.
Yeah, I would say if you're
Wonderful
planning to have a gap year, that you should apply when your gap year is ending.
Oh, over, yeah.
Yeah,
Dr.
so
Zadigo, would
the
this something?
follow-up.
So this follow-up, I don't know if the person who followed up is the same person who asked the first question. So I guess I'll speak to both maybe, which I think is just building on what everyone's saying here, which is if you're in this second category of you don't feel ready and you're taking the gap year to get more experience, then definitely wait. If you think you want a gap year because you want to take a year off from school and just kind of like rest or something, what you can do is apply, and if you get in, defer for a year. At least at Yale, you can do that. I assume at
Okay.
least as you can. So that is an option, and I don't think anyone's going to hold it against you if you do that. But it depends on what you're using that time for, right? And whether it's going to help your application or potentially just mean that you're waiting for a year and you may never apply anyway, I guess.
Yeah, and please understand that in addition to the fellowship funding that's available at our schools, there's sometimes some additional fellowship funding available from the institution. They have different names: top-up awards, top-up awards, graduate honor fellowships, etc. But if you defer, you should check the institution's policies on whether that additional fellowship will continue to apply. It might be that they will guarantee you the basic funding, which typically is tuition, fees, stipend, health insurance. And if there's an additional fellowship, you may or may not have that re-awarded. So
Help.
check with the institutional policy, and I'll defer to my colleagues before we'll go to the next question.
Yeah, so I really agree with that. Usually any add-on fellowships or additional stipends or additional research funds are for if you start immediately. If you defer, those almost always disappear.
Yes. And keep in mind, this is depending on your discipline. I've encountered this a little in the past couple of years, is you've been admitted to a program and then the next year, the program decided that, well, we're not taking any new students. That's not common. It's very rare, but it could happen. So if you defer, and let's say you were admitted for the fall 2022, and you decided to defer, and in the fall 2023, the program decided, we're gonna cut back. Because sometimes in smaller programs, sometimes there's they have oversubscription, kind of like the airlines. They were expecting 3 students, but there were 5 students that there was no way in heck they could turn down. So, the faculty can make the decision. We're gonna pursue all 5, get permission from the dean and provost, so they'll take all 5, but the next year they won't take any, so that they can balance the funding that's needed to support those 5 students. It's not common, but keep in mind, it could happen. So can someone get to the final question?
Yeah, so the last question is, personally, I don't feel ready to apply to graduate schools as I'm not yet prepared where I would want to commit to be. And how does the gap year research assistant or lab manager position compare to graduate school? I can't really speak to this because I'm a humanist and there are no lab managers in the humanities. I can speak to it a little bit from knowing a lot of scientists, but it wouldn't be my primary area. So I don't know if someone else would like to speak to that.
I'm also a humanist, but I would take a slightly different approach to this question. If you don't feel ready for graduate school, you're not ready for graduate school. And like graduate school is hard. So if you're not ready for it, then you should take the gap year and figure out what skills you need in order to be best prepared for it.
I agree. I really feel like if you're asking about a gap year, you should probably take a gap year because you're already thinking about it.
So
and I want to add, okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, they don't come, in my opinion, they don't compare at all. They're not even close to the same animal.
Yeah.
And I would absolutely agree with Matthew and Patricia that if you're not ready to go to grad school or you feel uncertain, don't go. It's such a huge time and financial commitment that it's better to take the gap year and decide that this is really, really what you want to do than invest all that time and financial constraints to discover that it's really not what you wanted to do. And those are, this is personal. These are really important financial years as you're planning towards retirement as well. When you're in graduate school, you're not contributing to any retirement accounts. There's no way that you can do that. And so I think that working and having a full-time employment is not a bad thing to do while you're working out what your future goals are.
Yeah, I want to add an unsolicited comment for our students, because this is mainly focused on social science and humanities. If you believe that you need additional training to prepare for the PhD, there is a wonderful post-bac program, and I tell everybody about it. It's at the University of Pittsburgh. It's called the Hot Metal Bridge Program, and it is one of the few places that provides post-baccalaureate opportunities for for students in the social sciences and the humanities. So if it is that you feel that you need additional training, please look it up. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. You can also let your faculty mentors and research or program directors know about it. The Hot Metal Bridge Program in the Dietrich Graduate School at the University of Pittsburgh. Wonderful program. Go ahead.
I want to chime in that we have one too here at Yale.
Good for you.
So
tell us about
you should apply there. The post-baccalaureate research education program, we have an NIH version for the scientists, and then we have another ESI, Emerging Scholar Initiative, for the humanists and social sciences. I was on a panel before this for them, but so definitely check that out as well. And I think this is growing, these post-bac programs. And so that's a really good opportunity to get a test run of graduate school and figure out whether you're ready and whether the place that you're applying to. So the part of the goal of this is figuring out whether Yale is the place for you. And the benefit, going back to everything that we were saying, is you get a chance often to work with a faculty member on a project for a year or 2 years. And that person can often end up being a writer of one of your letters of recommendation. And if you want to apply to Yale and you're working with a Yale faculty member on a project and they say, yes, I want this student, then it's pretty good chances of you getting into that program. So think about that as another option.
Absolutely. And NSF and NIH have a lot of post-bac programs for STEM. Hopkins is also doing some post-bac programs in the humanities and social sciences. So I think it's a new and growing area that maybe people didn't think about before for the humanities.
Okay, so our time is up. And once again, we'd like to thank you so much for attending this presentation. I'd like to personally thank my colleagues for joining me and sharing their years and years of experience. I'm not going to say decades, you're trying to age us. We're still young and vibrant and sharing our knowledge with you.
That's right.
So if you have any additional questions for us, we would ask you to get in contact with our colleagues at the Leadership Alliance so that they can forward those questions to us and we can continue to provide you with answers based on our years of experience. Again, thank you very much, and you all have a fantastic day. And continue to make us proud with all of the contributions that you're making during the summer and hopefully the contributions you'll make during your graduate education.
Good luck.
Thanks for dropping in.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.